Well. After 5 whole years, Cardi was finally forced to release his long awaited and highly anticipated album, I Am Music. And I say forced because we all know goddamn well the album didn't drop because Cardi wanted it to. It's crazy to think that I started and graduated from university before this album released. My kid's sister was born and grew up before this album released. Even two countries went to war before this album released. Like major world events came and went before the release of this album. It's just absolute insanity. Shout out to all the label execs that had Cardi at gunpoint and bullied this shit out of him. But the ridiculousness of just how long it took before this album came out aside, this wonderful video that graced your timeline, which you have clicked on, is basically me here to talk about and give a review on the album now that it's finally here and has spent the past couple of days receiving several spins from me. And this album is a divisive one, it seems. I've seen some people call it the second coming of Beethoven, and I've also seen some people simply slap the mid label on it like they do to literally anything and everything. However, after having listened to the album for myself, I want to say I Am Music was an album that absolutely didn't need 5 years to be released. Not gonna lie, nothing about this album sounded like it needed waiting an entire presidential tenure and half for. Now, slow your horses, Glazers. I'm not ripping it apart. I'm just letting you all know that this wasn't the genre-innovating album we thought it would be. During my first listen of the album, one feeling I just couldn't shake off was the feeling of it being unfinished, incomplete, and sounding pretty rushed, which is a baffling thing to feel for an album that was purposefully sat on for half a decade. And when I was initially drafting out this review, that was going to be a major criticism that I planned to throw at it. However, after listening to it some more throughout the course of the week, while that feeling has somewhat alleviated due to gaining familiarity with the album, I still stand by the fact that this album sounded like it was a relatively rushed and incomplete mess of a project. This new body of work from Cardi lacked the presence and feeling of impact that Cardi's previous albums had. While initially going through the album, there were simply a couple of times with certain songs where I felt they just weren't sticking in my ears and I just wasn't remembering them. I remember when I listened to Dilate for the first time, and I remember how I felt while listening to it. Each song felt like I was dimension hopping with just how outstanding they were to my ears. Dilate was a coherent album with intention and direction in its sound. The key word here being coherence, which I Am Music mostly lacked. I realized after more spins that the sense of the album being incomplete that I initially got stemmed from the fact that this album's runtime is relatively short. Taking a quick look at I Am Music and seeing a 30-track album, you'd be fooled into thinking that this was going to be a long 2-hour plus listen, but this album is actually just an hour and 17 minutes long. I Am Music, for the most part, basically just sounded like a compilation of short songs that didn't sound like they were fully fleshed out and realized. It contained some songs that sounded really good, but were just so short they didn't get the adequate duration time to properly sink into my ears, hence why I just forgot about them during my initial run of the album. A lot of songs on the album could have really used additional content, cause the album doesn't really stand out next to Cardi's other works because of just how brief and over with some of these songs are. The short length of some of these songs made them not memorable at all during the first listen. A lot of songs don't really start sticking out until after multiple listens if you care enough to do that. There were only like 4 or 5 songs on the album that sounded like they were fully realized full-length songs. A decent chunk of songs on the album were just a tad bit too short to leave significant impact. Even though they might have sounded pretty good, a lot of them require you going back again to discover them, and even then they still leave a lot to be desired. Essentially, I feel like the overall album lacked the Cardi coherence and hook that the likes of Dilate and even Whole Lotta Red had when you first listened to them. I Am Music sounded like it was scrambled together very last minute and patched up significantly with its features. There were times when listening to this album when I felt like I heard a lot more of Travis Scott and Future than I did Cardi. I'm pretty sure Future literally had a full solo track on the album. I also think the album lacked what I would call the Cardi identity, And by that I mean the album didn't have the usual notable representative songs, at least ones on the level of Dial It and Whole Lotta Red. The way Dial It is represented by songs like Long Time and RIP, and Whole Lotta Red is represented by songs like Sky and Over, songs that define those individual albums and shape how we know and love them today due to how much they stuck out the moment we heard them. I Am Music's representative songs, although great in their own right, pale in comparison to the quality of its predecessors. They are great, but not as outstanding, innovative, and unique with their sound. In conclusion, I Am Music sounded like a half baked and rushed project that was clearly pressured out of Cardi. It didn't sound like an organized and well crafted project that was being fine tuned and refined for the past 5 years. It just sounded like a bunch of songs and verses that were thrown together in the last year and beefed up with features. Overall, it was a very fun listen. Like I said, despite being 30 tracks, it's actually a relatively short album in terms of duration, so it was quick to get through. The album contained some absolute bangers like Philly, which is the best song on the album in my opinion. Rather Lie, a fantastic and beautiful track that had me feeling like I just met the love of my life, and Pass Them Hoes a Fee, which is just a great joint for the club. Philly, Rather Lie, and Good Credit stand as the standout songs of the album, as some of the few songs that were actually long enough to properly enjoy. But like I said, they pale in comparison to the quality of Sky, Long Time, RIP, and hell, even Magnolia. Jumpin' and Twin Trim, which are Cardi and Uzi's first collab in what has probably been like forever, were pretty good, but they were just so short. They needed an additional 2 minutes of music for them to be absolute peak. Those two songs were just too criminally short for such a legendary reunion. K-pop also sounded pretty good, but it's a 1 minute and 30-second song. Barely any time to spend with it. The song is literally over a minute after it starts. Let's take a break from the few good songs I just highlighted. There were also a handful of mid songs. Pop Out was atrocious, but I personally find it funny to listen to at least. Cardi's vocals on the song were just so unserious. I can't even be mad at it for that reason alone. Oh, and Crush. Crush has to be the single biggest disappointment in the history of modern music. What was probably the most anticipated song of the album ever since the leak ended up not even being a song, but just a 2 minute build up to nothing in its entirety. I was listening to this crap and already a full minute into it was waiting for the song to start, and it never started. The beat never dropped, the lyrics never kicked in. It was just 2 minutes of ad-libs from both Cardi and Travis Scott respectively. A genuinely underwhelming disappointment of a song. A channel on YouTube made a remix back when the song was initially leaked, and that fan-made remix was 1000 times better than the original song. If you're a glazer who thinks I just said some slanderous shit, I don't care. It's simply the truth. Crush just wasn't good. I didn't like Evil Jordan. Crank was ass, Trim was ass, Radar was ass, Wake Up Filthy was mid, that song with Young Thug was mid, and Like Wheezy was ass. Cocaine Nose though. Cocaine Nose was phenomenal. Literally Opium National Anthem. The guitars in the song made my soul transcend this earthly plane, and I believe Destroy Lonely would have made for a great addition to the song, but it was pretty good all the same. Money On was fun, Olympian was fun, Mojo Jojo was pretty fire, but I preferred Backdoor a whole lot more though. I didn't really care for Kendrick on a Cardi album. His presence was fine, but he was a whatever feature for me honestly. Travis and Future were much more outstanding as features, and if I could, I would have removed two of Kendrick's contributions for more Lil Uzi or literally anyone else. HBA was speed racing fuel. If you ever hear on the news that someone got arrested for reenacting Need for Speed Most Wanted on the highway while listening to Cardi, it was me, cause that's what listening to HBA got me wanting to do. I See You Baby Boy was also a delight to listen to after all these years. I really love that song. Any song that I didn't mention was probably so underwhelming it didn't leave any impact on me. In conclusion, this album was a mixed bag of some pretty great songs, definitely a handful of bangers, and some good songs that were unfortunately not long enough to enjoy and be impactful, and also a handful of mid songs. Then there were also songs that were just outright terrible, like Crush. Essentially, the summary of my issues with this album is that a lot of songs aren't particularly memorable, and the overall sound quality of the album is slightly on the weaker end compared to its predecessors, as well as the fact that a lot of the songs are just too damn short. But it's not a bad album by any means. It was fun to listen to while drawing, and the top songs will definitely continue to be in rotation until when I eventually get tired of them. And so, with all that being said, to give it a rating, it gets a 6 over 10 for nice. Not bad at all, but definitely Cardi's weakest installment. And with how long it took for this to drop, probably his last ever installment. So in that case, see y'all in 2032 or something when the next album drops. Bye.